Men have wrestled with this question for centuries. Why does she say one thing, yet act completely different? Why does she say, "I'm fine," when she's clearly not, or "do whatever you want," when she doesn't actually mean it? You're not crazy, brother. You're just not speaking her language. Let me break it down. Women tend to speak through emotional coding. Unlike men, who are often more direct, logical, and linear in communication, women's words are frequently shaped by how they feel in the moment, not necessarily by what they objectively mean. So when a man asks a woman how she's doing and she says, "I'm fine," she might be using those words not to convey peace, but to signal frustration, sadness, or emotional distance. It's not a lie, it's a protective filter. In her world, language is a medium of emotion, not just a tool for exchanging information. That simple phrase, "I'm fine," might actually be saying, "I don't feel seen," or "I want you to care enough to look deeper." And if you take her words at face value without reading into the emotional context, you'll constantly feel blindsided by her later reactions. You'll wonder why she's distant, why she's cold, why she suddenly pulls away, or why she seems irritated over something you didn't even know was an issue. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings between men and women. Men are trained to listen literally. We are taught that words mean what they say. So when a woman says, "Go ahead, do whatever you want," most men interpret that as permission, but in many cases it's not permission, it's a challenge. It's a statement of emotional withdrawal. What she may be communicating underneath is, "I feel like you don't consider my feelings," or "You're making choices without me, and that makes me feel small or excluded." But if a man doesn't speak this unspoken emotional dialect, he'll walk right into emotional landmines. He'll think everything's fine when, in fact, she's slowly detaching emotionally. This doesn't mean women are manipulative or intentionally confusing. It means their communication is layered. You're dealing with someone who feels first and speaks second. Her emotional reality often shapes her verbal expression, which means what she says is colored by the emotional lens she's looking through in that moment. And here's where most men fall short. They hear the words but ignore the tone, the facial expression, the silence before or after. That silence is part of the conversation. That pause, that sigh, that subtle shift in her energy, all of it is language. You just weren't trained to listen to it, and it goes even deeper. Women, from a very young age, are taught to suppress direct emotional expression in order to be nice, to be agreeable, to avoid being labeled as dramatic or emotional. So even when she's hurting deeply, she's learned to package that pain in socially acceptable language. That's why she might downplay her needs, sugarcoat her anger, or mask her sadness. Her "I'm okay" might be a trauma response. It's no big deal might be a cry for reassurance. Her "you don't have to" might actually mean "I want you to, but I don't want to force you." If you don't understand this, you will forever misinterpret her and call her unpredictable, confusing, or too emotional. But once you understand that her language operates on an emotional frequency, you'll stop reacting to the surface and start responding to the root. This is where true connection begins, not by asking, "What did she say?" but by asking, "What is she feeling underneath what she said?" Once you master that, you stop getting caught in arguments over what was said and start building intimacy over what was meant. That's the real key. Because in the emotional realm, feelings speak louder than words, and if you can learn to hear those feelings, without her even having to explain them, you become the kind of man she doesn't want to walk away from. When she gives you mixed signals, sometimes it's not confusion, it's a test, a subconscious test of your emotional intelligence, your attentiveness, and your masculine presence. Women don't always consciously plan these tests, but they are deeply embedded in female psychology. It's a way for her to assess whether the man she's with is someone who can truly understand her, not just hear her words, but decode the emotion behind them. When a woman says something indirect, vague, or contradictory, what she often wants to see is, do you care enough to look beyond the surface? Do you see me, or are you only paying attention when I scream? This kind of testing isn't malicious. It's not about playing games. It's about seeking emotional safety. A woman wants to feel that the man she is with can tune into her needs without her having to always spell them out. She wants to know that if she's feeling insecure, vulnerable, or anxious, you'll be able to read the room, notice the shift in her mood, and act accordingly. That you'll pick up on the small cues, the change in her voice, the way she withdraws, the sudden silence. These are all part of her emotional language, and she's observing how fluent you are in it. Sometimes she will say something neutral or ambiguous just to see how you'll respond. For example, she might say, "It's okay, I guess," when something clearly bothered her. She's watching to see whether you'll ignore it and move on, or whether you'll stop, look her in the eyes, and say, "No, reel it, or to me. I want to understand." That moment is more powerful than you realize, because to her, that's proof that you care, that you're emotionally attuned, that you're strong enough to handle the truth. If you fail the test, if you brush it off or avoid the confrontation, she may not lash out immediately, but internally she will feel less safe, less seen, less connected, and over time that distance grows into resentment. The truth is, women test men not because they want to hurt them, but because they want to trust them. And trust is not built through words. It's built through actions, through how you show up in emotionally complex moments. When she's not saying what she means, she's giving you an opportunity to step up. She's silently asking, are you paying attention? If you pass that test, if you show up calmly, patiently, and lovingly, she opens up more. She feels safe to be herself, raw and unfiltered. But if you fail, if you become defensive, dismissive, or emotionally absent, she begins to retreat. A lot of men think these tests are unfair. They say, why can't she just say what she means? But that's like asking, why does the ocean have waves? It's her nature. Women test not because they're playing games, but because they're navigating vulnerability. And the deeper she feels for you, the more important these tests become. Because the higher the emotional stakes, the greater her need to know whether you're truly capable of holding space for her. It's also important to understand that women often live in a world where their emotions are dismissed or minimized. So when she tests you, part of her is hoping you'll prove her wrong, that you're not like the others, that you won't shut her down, that you won't walk away when things get complicated. Her mixed signals aren't always confusion. They're invitations. Invitations to dive deeper, to stop operating on autopilot, to become more emotionally present. And when a man learns to pass these tests, not by manipulation, but by being grounded, compassionate, and attentive, he becomes the kind of man who is rare, the kind of man who makes her feel deeply safe, even when her own emotions feel chaotic. This is not about solving her problems or fixing her feelings. It's about showing her, through your presence, that you're a man who doesn't flinch when emotions get messy, that you can remain steady even when she's not, that you can handle the test, not just once, but again and again, because real connection, real love, and real masculine leadership are proven in those exact moments, not when everything is smooth, but when things are unclear, unpredictable, and emotionally charged. That's when you show her who you really are. Sometimes what a woman truly feels is buried so deeply inside her that she's unable or unwilling to express it directly. This isn't because she's playing games or trying to manipulate anyone. It's because she fears rejection, judgment, or being misunderstood. There's an entire world inside her, full of emotions, insecurities, and questions she hasn't fully worked through herself. And when it comes time to communicate those feelings to a man, something inside her resists. She hesitates, not out of deception, but because she's been conditioned, sometimes by society, sometimes by past experiences, to silence herself when she's most vulnerable. Imagine this. She feels lonely, neglected, or emotionally disconnected. Maybe something you said hurt her, maybe it's not even about you. Maybe it's old wounds resurfacing, but instead of saying, "I feel unloved," she says, "I'm just tired." Instead of saying, "I miss your attention," she says, "Nothing's wrong." Why? Because the last time she was honest about her emotional needs, maybe she was told she was overreacting. Maybe she was mocked, invalidated, or met with cold indifference. Or maybe she learned early on in life, through family, school, or previous relationships, that expressing her feelings meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. So now she speaks in riddles. Not to confuse you, but to protect herself. She drops hints instead of declarations. She waits for you to notice the shift in her energy instead of stating outright that something's wrong. And if you're not tuned in, you'll miss it. You'll think everything is fine. You'll believe her when she says, "I'm okay," or "It's not a big deal." But behind those words is often a heart begging to be understood. She doesn't want to beg for your attention. She wants you to want to give it. She doesn't want to force communication. She wants it to come naturally without her having to fight for it. And when that doesn't happen, she quietly begins to disconnect. This emotional suppression isn't always voluntary. It's part of a survival mechanism. Women live in a world where showing emotion is often seen as a weakness, where sensitivity is ridiculed, where vulnerability is weaponized. So over time, she learns to hold back, to say what's acceptable instead of what's true, to nod and smile when she wants to scream and cry, to say "I understand" when she actually feels deeply misunderstood. The longer she lives like this, the harder it becomes to speak her truth plainly. She begins to doubt whether her feelings are even valid. She questions whether she's being too much. So instead of burdening you with her reality, she masks it with politeness, with silence, with coded language. And here's where many men make a fatal mistake. They assume that silence means peace, that the absence of confrontation means everything is okay. But women are not always loud when they're hurt. Sometimes they go quiet. Sometimes they withdraw. And if you don't have the emotional sensitivity to see through that silence, you won't realize there's a storm brewing beneath the calm. You'll think you're doing everything right, when in reality, she's slowly building walls between you and her emotional world. What she's looking for is not a man who can solve all her problems, but a man who can create an environment where she feels safe enough to express them, where she doesn't have to filter her emotions to protect your ego, where she doesn't have to downplay her pain just to keep the peace, where she can be fully seen and fully heard, without being dismissed, corrected, or judged. That kind of space is rare, but it's what she's craving. Not just love, but emotional safety. Not just attention, but attunement. And when she doesn't feel that safety, she'll begin to say things that contradict how she truly feels. She might say, "I don't need anything," when she's starving for affection. She might say, "I'm happy for you," when she feels deeply neglected. She might even say, "It's okay, I get it," when inside she feels abandoned. These contradictions aren't manipulation, they're her armor. Her way of surviving in a world that hasn't always treated her emotions with respect. So if you want to understand why a woman says one thing but means another, you have to understand the fears behind her words. You have to recognize the emotional labor she performs just to keep the relationship afloat. You have to see that beneath her indirect communication is often a heart full of longing, a longing to be known, to be felt, to be cherished not just for her body or beauty, but for her soul, her struggles, and her truth. And unless she feels safe enough to show you that truth, she'll keep hiding it, one quiet, misinterpreted phrase at a time. Society has conditioned women to avoid conflict. From an early age, many girls are taught, both explicitly and subtly, that being agreeable, polite, and accommodating is more socially acceptable than being assertive, confrontational, or direct. This programming doesn't vanish when she becomes an adult. It becomes deeply embedded in her communication style, so when something bothers her, when she feels dismissed or disrespected, when a boundary is crossed, she often won't confront it head on. Instead, she'll bury it under phrases like "it's nothing," "I'm okay," or "do whatever you want." On the surface, it may look like she's passive or emotionally closed off, but in truth, she's learned to communicate in this roundabout way to avoid being seen as difficult, dramatic, or overly emotional. This avoidance of direct confrontation isn't about weakness. It's about emotional survival. In many situations, women have seen that speaking up too directly comes with consequences, being labeled as a nag, being ignored, or being met with aggression. So instead, they package their discomfort in non-threatening ways. This is why women will often downplay their real needs. They've been trained to believe that expressing strong emotional opinions might make them seem less lovable or less desirable. So instead of telling you, "I don't like how you spoke to me," she'll just go quiet. Instead of saying, "I feel disrespected," she might say, "I'm just tired." These statements aren't random, they're shield. But here's where the misalignment happens. While she is avoiding direct conflict, she still feels everything. Her emotions are not muted just because she doesn't speak them out loud. They build quietly beneath the surface. They accumulate, and over time, the gap between what she says and what she feels grows wider. This is why you might suddenly face an emotional explosion after weeks of everything appearing fine. It's not that the issue just appeared, it's that it was never dealt with, and now it's overflowing. Her avoidance of conflict doesn't mean absence of pain, it means unresolved pain, hidden pain. A lot of men misinterpret this behavior. They assume that if she isn't speaking up, everything must be good. They take her silence as satisfaction, but in reality, she may have stopped bringing things up because she's tired of not being heard, or worse, because she's afraid of how you'll react. She may believe that telling you the truth will only make things worse. So she gives you the answer that causes the least friction, not the one that reflects her real feelings. When she says, "It's fine," it might be because she doesn't believe you'll do anything differently if she tells you it's not. When she says, "Whatever you want," It may be because she's already given up trying to express her preferences, not because she doesn't care, but because she feels that her opinions don't matter in your eyes. This suppression becomes a quiet erosion of intimacy, because true connection isn't built on convenience, it's built on honesty. And if she doesn't feel safe enough to be honest with you, even about small things, she will start hiding larger parts of herself. Not out of spite, but out of emotional necessity. And when that emotional honesty dies, so does the emotional bond. You'll be physically close, but spiritually distant. She'll still smile, still cook, still play the role, but inside she's disconnected. And once a woman disconnects emotionally, it's hard to get her back. To prevent that slow emotional death, a man has to learn to create space for conflict, not fear it. He has to show her, not just say, that he can handle disagreement without shutting down, yelling, mocking, or becoming cold. He has to make her feel that her truth won't lead to punishment, that even if her words are difficult, even if she's angry or emotional, he will meet her with steadiness, with maturity, with presence. That's how you break the cycle of avoidance, not by demanding that she speak more directly, but by proving that you're a man who can hold the weight of her truth without crumbling under it or lashing out against it. This kind of presence is rare. It requires emotional discipline. A man must learn to listen beyond his ego, to not take her frustration as an attack, but as a signal that something in the emotional connection needs repair. And when you start responding that way, calm, steady, open, she'll start unlearning her avoidance. Slowly, she'll begin to open up. She'll start telling you what she really thinks, what she really needs, what she truly feels. And that's when the real relationship begins, not the performance, not the polite version, but the raw, vulnerable, authentic version of her, the one she's kept hidden from most people her entire life. But she'll only reveal it if she feels safe, if she feels that you are not just physically present, but emotionally grounded enough to handle her whole truth. Sometimes the contradictions in a woman's words are not strategic or intentional. They are a direct reflection of her own inner emotional turbulence. The truth is, there are moments when even she doesn't fully understand what she's feeling. Her emotional world is dynamic, shaped by internal cycles, fluctuating hormones, stressors, past trauma, and shifting emotional needs. What feels right to her at one moment may feel completely wrong an hour later. What she wants in the morning might be the exact opposite of what she desires by nightfall. This emotional inconsistency isn't irrational. It's human, and it's deeply tied to how women process life through emotion before logic. One of the most misunderstood truths is that women are not always in control of the emotional lens through which they view the world. That lens changes based on her environment, energy levels, mood, and even the subconscious patterns she's inherited from childhood. So, when she says something like, "I don't want to talk right now," she may genuinely feel that in the moment, but 30 minutes later, she might feel abandoned because you respected her space and didn't reach out. It's not about trickery. It's about emotional fluidity. She's not being deceptive. She's simply evolving through different emotional states that are often in conflict with each other. This internal fluctuation can also be heightened by hormonal shifts throughout the month, changes that influence mood, energy, and perception. During certain phases, she might be more sensitive, more irritable, more introspective. Things that wouldn't normally bother her suddenly sting. Words you've said 100 times may feel cold or distant now. A gesture that used to make her smile might feel empty. These aren't things she chooses. They're experiences she rides through, often without even realizing how much they're affecting her. And during these times, her words may not align with her core truth. She might say things like, "I'm done," "leave me alone," or "you don't get it." Not because she truly wants distance, but because she's overwhelmed by feelings she hasn't yet made sense of. In these moments, most men make the mistake of reacting too literally. They hear the words and respond with logic. They say, "But you told me to leave you alone," or "You said it didn't matter." And from a logical perspective, they're right. But in the emotional realm, this approach completely misses the mark. Because what she needed in that moment wasn't a rational transaction. It was emotional containment. She needed you not to fix her words, but to feel her emotional undercurrent, to stay grounded even when she was chaotic, to be the calm in her storm, not another wave crashing into her. This is why it's so important for men to stop expecting linear behavior from a nonlinear emotional being. Women are not puzzles to be solved. They are rivers to be understood, sometimes calm, sometimes wild, always changing, and your role is not to dam the river or try to force it to flow straight, but to navigate it with presence, patience, and respect. That means understanding that her emotional truth in one moment may not be her permanent truth, that her contradictions are often invitations for you to lean in, not pull away. They are her way of saying, "I need your strength, even when I can't articulate what's wrong." A woman who feels emotionally safe with you will still experience internal contradictions, but she'll feel freer to express them openly. She'll say, "I know I told you I was fine earlier, but I wasn't," or "I didn't know what I needed until just now." But she'll only say those things if she believes you can handle them, if you don't judge her for being emotionally complex, if you don't accuse her of being crazy or irrational or hard to deal with. Because the truth is, she's not any of those things. She's just emotionally alive. And when she finds a man who can witness that emotional aliveness without withdrawing, criticizing, or shutting her down, she begins to trust him on a deeper level. What most men don't realize is that this kind of emotional fluidity isn't a flaw. It's a strength. It means she feels deeply. It means she can sense things beyond words. It means she's capable of deep empathy, connection, and intuition, but only if those gifts are honored, not dismissed. When a man sees through the contradiction and says, "I hear your words, but I also see that something deeper is going on. I'm here," he becomes irreplaceable, not because he always gets it right, but because he chooses to stay emotionally present even when things are confusing. And that's what she's truly looking for. Not a perfect man, not a man who never misunderstands her, but a man who can sit with her contradictions without reacting to them, a man who can witness her without trying to control her, a man who doesn't flinch when her emotions are raw, loud, or unpredictable. That man becomes her emotional anchor, and in a world that constantly tells her to suppress, hide, or adjust her emotions, that kind of presence is not just rare, it's sacred. Women often communicate with layers of meaning, not because they're trying to confuse, but because they are driven by a deep desire for connection, emotional depth, and intimacy that goes beyond the literal. This is why what she says on the surface might only be the tip of the iceberg. The real message is hidden underneath the tone, the timing, the context, the silence between her words. She's not just giving you information. She's offering you a puzzle, a glimpse into her inner emotional world. And whether you realize it or not, how you respond to that determines how safe she feels with you. When she says something like, "You're always on your phone," it's not just about the phone. It might be about feeling neglected, ignored, or emotionally abandoned. When she says, "You never listen," she may actually be saying, "I don't feel close to you anymore." These aren't just complaints, they're emotional signals. And if you take them at surface value, if you treat them like logical problems to fix or rational debates to win, you miss the entire point. You miss her asterisk. Women are not interested in having transactional conversations. They want emotional resonance. They want to know, do you see me? Do you feel me? Do you understand the things I'm not saying? And if they sense that you're only engaging with the literal interpretation of their words, they'll begin to feel emotionally starved, even if you're physically present. They'll feel unseen in the very moments they're trying to open up, and that emotional gap becomes devastating over time. This is why so many women feel more connected to someone who just gets it than someone who is technically always available, because presence isn't just about being there, it's about being tuned in. It's about hearing the subtext, noticing the hesitation in her voice, sensing the weight behind her silence. That's the difference between a man who listens and a man who understands. A woman who feels misunderstood over and over again will eventually stop explaining. She'll start withdrawing. She'll smile more and speak less. She'll go from expressing her feelings to hiding them, not because she doesn't have anything to say, but because she's already concluded that you can't or won't hear her real message. A lot of men struggle with this because they approach communication with an engineering mindset. They want precision, clarity, logic, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's how many men are wired. But when you apply that same framework to a woman's emotional expression, it creates disconnection. Because she's not looking to be analyzed. She's looking to be felt. Her words aren't just words. They're emotional offerings. She wants you to slow down and enter her world, to feel what she feels, even if it doesn't make perfect sense. And that takes empathy, not logic, patience, not problem solving, curiosity, not control. Think of it this way. When she speaks, she's extending an invitation to connect, not just through language, but through emotion. And how you respond tells her what kind of man you are. If you interrupt her, dismiss her, or offer solutions too quickly, you're signaling that you care more about resolving discomfort than experiencing it with her. But if you pause, lean in, and say, "Tell me more," or "That sounds hard, how are you really feeling?" that tells her you're a safe place, that you're not just hearing her, you're witnessing her. This desire for deeper connection is also why women sometimes exaggerate or dramatize their language. It's not because they're trying to mislead you. It's because they want you to feel the weight of what they're experiencing. When she says, "You never help me," she doesn't mean never in the literal sense. She means, "I feel overwhelmed and I don't feel supported right now." When she says, "You don't care," it's not an accusation. It's a translation of emotional emptiness. But if you respond defensively and say, "That's not true, I did this and that," you're missing the signal. You're debating her words instead of answering her emotional need. This creates a tragic loop. She speaks emotionally, you respond logically. She feels invalidated, you feel accused, and both of you end up feeling misunderstood. And it all could have been avoided if you had paused to ask yourself, what is she really trying to tell me right now? Because beneath every complaint, every outburst, every quiet moment is a desire for closeness, a desire to be known and felt, not fixed, not judged, just held, emotionally held. When a woman senses that you can feel her subtext without her having to spell it out, she begins to relax. She feels safe. Her defenses drop. She becomes more open, more affectionate, more trusting. And that's when the relationship becomes rich with meaning. That's when she begins to bloom emotionally, because she knows she's with a man who doesn't just hear what she says, but understands what she means. That's the man she shares her secrets with. That's the man she chooses, not just with her body, but with her soul. So if you ever find yourself asking, why does she say one thing but mean another? Don't rush to frustration. Pause, breathe, look deeper, because behind those mixed messages is often a woman searching for safety, yearning for understanding, craving emotional closeness in a world that often punishes her for speaking her truth. Your job isn't to decode every word with logic, it's to stay present with her through the chaos, through the contradictions, through the silence. Be the man who listens not just with his ears, but with his heart. Because when she feels seen without needing to explain, when she feels heard without raising her voice, that's when she gives you the most sacred part of herself, her trust. And once you have that, you're no longer just in a relationship. You're in a bond that few men will ever understand, and even fewer will ever earn.